Hi there. This is a story that I recently wrote called Those Rat Bastards. Those Rat Bastards, by me. The rats were thinking, conspiring against him now. He could hear them in the walls at night, scurrying to some unknown deed that rats tend to, trying to wait till I'm asleep. He would think to himself at such times. Those rat bastards. Thinking back on it, he would have said that he first noticed it early one morning after he had first moved into the old house. He woke to hear a rat chewing away at something within the walls. He banged on it 3 times to scare the little beast off. At first, there was only the thrilling rain, a victorious silence. But as he turned away, smiling to himself, clear as a bell, though quiet it may have been, he heard the vicious little shit knocking back in the same pattern. At the time, he shrugged it off, telling himself he must have imagined it. Looking back, going over every single minute detail of the encounter for hours on end, he knew what it was. A warning. They had even stopped speaking in their codes of squeaks and scratching, no longer feeling the need for such secrecy. Their plan was so advanced at this point. He could only catch certain words as they scuffled through the walls. However, one word in particular always seemed to stick out to him, spoken in tiny whispers, almost inaudible to the human ear. Sabotage. The The house was exceedingly large and exceedingly old. The plaster mold was cracked, the floorboards bent. If too much commotion was made in any of the rooms, crumbles of ceiling would come up tumbling down in dust-like plumes somewhere. The house was 3 stories, with a multitude of rooms filled with the remnants of old-world craftsmanship. An attic that was nearly a floor unto itself, and a basement filled with the belongings of the previous inhabitants. To him, it seemed perfect. He loved large, older houses and had always wanted to live in one. Alone. But the longer he stayed, the more he could see he was not alone. And the more he thought of the tiny, dark places a rat can nest and travel, having access to that entire house. Surely they must have been there before him, and by now they would have tiny machines in the walls, most likely a complex network of weights, pulleys, and the things you would find inside of clocks to achieve their fell purposes. But just what were they planning? At first, the best courses of action seemed to be the practical ones. However, after a month, the cat disappeared. For several nights he swore he could hear it yowling faintly somewhere in the house. But try as he might, he could never pinpoint the exact room that it was coming from. Another 2 months passed before, while going up to the attic to search for some documents, he saw the cat hanging from the back leg by some kite string, looking as though, save for a few tufts of hair, it had been completely skinned. The horror of it all didn't set in until approaching it, he realized it was still alive. The bloody thing croaked out some sort of unearthly noise as it writhed in agony. They had tortured the poor creature for months in their dark dungeons between the walls, and now left it to be put out of its misery by its master. He then knew the cruelty they were capable of. Poison was the next solution. Small pellets of arsenic placed strategically in corners in cabinets or poured into holes in the wallpaper. At first he thought it might be working. He heard fewer disturbances at night as he lay awake until sunrise, staring at the cracked ceiling. After a few more nights, he barely heard a thing, and thinking on his apparent victory, allowed himself to drift off to sleep. He awoke late the next morning, groggy, and attempting to recall half-remembered dreams in which he was the Pied Piper of Hamelin, but felt otherwise fully rested. Making his way to the second-story kitchen, he poured himself a bowl of bran flakes. Upon pouring on the milk, he delved his spoon into the bran, and just as it was approaching his mouth and he could already imagine it crunching between his teeth and sliding down his throat, he noticed that there was a tiny pellet of the poison he had just put out. He spat out profusely the milk and bran that had just passed beyond his lips, tossing the spoon and overturning the bowl. He tore apart every box or bag of food in the cabinets and the icebox, searching diligently for even the tiniest speck of a pellet. The bastards had lulled him into his false sense of security and got him when he was asleep. He knew then the cunning craft they were capable of. That they would kill him soon, he no longer had any doubts. But it was a question of how that he racked his brains over every night until morning. They ran endlessly through the walls now. They were working on something big. They must have been keeping it in the attic. He wouldn't go near there anymore. A sneak attack was no longer feasible, as he had become too cautious to fall asleep, and would only eat, on the rare occasions that he did eat, canned foods, and only after hours of checking for even the slightest nick or dent on the outside to ensure nothing had been tampered with. He had to be absolutely sure of everything. No, they must have been planning a direct assault. But how? Would they all attack at once? Perhaps, but that may have been too much of a risk on their part. Though they would inevitably overcome him, surely they knew that he would put up a hell of a fight and take several of them with him. Maybe they would burn the house down with him inside, but then they would lose the base they had so long sought to fortify and control. Whatever their plan was, he knew he could not let them win. If he was going to die, it would be on his terms and nobody else's. He figured they would follow him if he simply tried to leave, and calling in anyone from the outside would only result in a dead body, for which the authorities would probably blame him. They had planned for this, undoubtedly. But so had he. The next day, he went shopping. When he returned, he locked himself in the basement to work and to plan, using an old fisherman's life preserver, some sawed-off pipes, electrical charges, and various chemicals, including but not limited to gasoline and nitroglycerin. He fashioned himself a suicide bomber's jacket. He would have to destroy the house, and in doing so take out every last one of them. He would go to the attic, rip the cord of his life preserver of death, setting off the charges. With all the dry cardboard boxes and insulation up there, the entire top floor would burst into flames instantly. The rest of the house, being old and dry, would light up in an instant, allowing very few, if any, to escape. He did not think any would, as they were probably all in the attic, waiting for him to come and discover their nasty surprise. Taking a breath to collect himself, he put on the jacket. As he walked to the basement steps, he stopped to pick up a box of old films to take with him. Better to burn with, my dear, he thought to himself.